Okay guys, so the first step, of course, as we said in the last video, is going to be to select our domain name. And the reason this is the first step is because we're going to brand everything else to the domain name that we pick. Now, to start off, I want to get rid of one of the most major myths with domain names. And what it is that domain name is not important for SEO. I mean, you cannot buy Google rankings just by buying a domain name with keywords in the domain name. You know, a lot of people seem to think that. A lot of people seem to think that just because you buy a domain name that has a keyword inside of the domain name, suddenly Google is going to give you great rankings. You know, that's not the way it works. What you have to realize is that Google's whole purpose and their whole mission and what keeps them in business is that they provide quality results for people that go to Google and do a search. Now, they're not going to let people purchase results by buying a domain name. You know, what Google's interested in is seeing that a site has content, seeing that the site is relevant to the search. You know, they're not stupid. They're not going to be fooled by just, you know, oh, I can go buy a domain name with a keyword in it, and all of a sudden Google's going to think that, you know, my site is relevant. That's not the way it works, and it's a little bit naive to think that. But I mean, really, you don't even have to take my word for that. All you have to do is go over to google.com and search for anything. Look at the top results and ask yourself, how many times were those keywords in the domain names that ranked high in the search results? The answer is almost never. I mean, a great example that comes to my mind is Wikipedia. When you search for almost anything, normally Wikipedia is high in the rankings. Well, the domain name Wikipedia doesn't have any keywords in it at all, yet it consistently ranks high in the rankings. Why is that? Well, Wikipedia has a lot of content, and content is what's important. That's what Google wants to see. You can't trick Google by buying a domain name that has keywords inside of the domain name. What you have to do is provide good quality content. Now, with the understanding that Google doesn't really care what your domain name is, there is a relevant and legitimate reason why you should have a keyword inside of your domain name, and that's for branding. That's for the user, so people can remember what your site was for, remember what your site was about. I mean, just think about it. If I was going to open up a website for a real estate agency, I wouldn't call it birdhousebuilding.com. It makes no sense. The two things aren't related in any way. So why it's not good for Google and it's not good for SEO, it is good for branding. And when selecting your domain name, that's what you want to remember. What you want is a domain name that is short, just because short domain names are easy to remember. You want a domain name that is relevant to the website. And again, that is not for Google, that is for the user, so that people can remember what the website is about. You want the name of the domain name to be relevant to the content of the site. And finally, which is the most important thing, you want a domain name that you can brand. Now, I personally, for my website, I actually decided that I wanted to brand myself. I wanted to brand Brett Ratekki, which is why my website is brettratekki.com. And even though that doesn't have any keywords in it, I consistently rank high on the first page of Google for every product I review. This is because I have a lot of content in my site. If you're not comfortable using your own name or branding your own name or branding your own personality, go ahead and feel free to pick another domain name, something that is relevant to, you know, the IM niche, to the product review niche. But just try to keep it short, try to keep it easy to remember, and understand that you're not doing this for search engine results. You're doing it for the users, just so that they can easily remember, you know, who you are and what you do. Now, once you decide on the domain you would like, the next step is going to be to see if that domain name is available. And doing that is really easy. Just go over to any registrar and look and see if that domain name is available. And in case you don't know, a registrar is a company that is authorized to register domain names for people. GoDaddy is one of the most popular ones. It's the one that I use. There are other ones such as Namecheap and HostGator. Pretty much any hosting company is also going to be a registrar as well. The thing that I want you to keep in mind, though, is you're going to have to buy hosting for your domain name. You're going to have to, you know, have a web server somewhere that hosts your site. To make it easy, you want to register your domain name with the same site that you're going to buy your hosting from. I mean, if you have the technical ability, you can actually register with one site and then host with another site. For example, myself, I register with GoDaddy, but I host with HostGator. But that requires setting up DNS, which is kind of complicated if you're not a technical person. So to make it really easy, you can just register with whatever site you're going to also do your hosting with. So with that in mind, the question then becomes, really, who do I want to host with? Because that's where I'm going to register my site with as well. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind when you're selecting who you're going to host with. The first thing I want you to keep in mind is that just about any host is going to be able to handle your site. You don't need a big package. You don't need, a dedicated server. You don't need a virtual private server. You don't need anything expensive for hosting. You can host it on a regular, shared, small hosting plan, and you're going to be just fine. BrettRayTechie.com is actually hosted on a HostGator shared package that I think I pay like $9 a month for, and I get tens of thousands of hits every month, and my site never goes down. It's perfectly fine to use a small package hosting plan. When picking your hosting, though, you do want to pick a company that offers Linux-based hosting. Yeah, you don't really want Windows-based hosting because Windows-based hosting is generally more expensive. It also has Plesk instead of cPanel, which is much more difficult to use. You want a Linux-based hosting that offers cPanel as well. And like I said, there's a couple of options that you could use. You could use GoDaddy, you could use Namecheap, you can use HostGator. I personally like GoDaddy, and if you're new to this business, if you're new to like building websites or setting up hosting, GoDaddy, why it's a little bit more expensive than some of the other options. I mean, there are cheap options out there. GoDaddy, I have found, has the best support. I mean, you can call them and you wait on the phone for 10 minutes and you're talking to somebody who's willing to help you. So for a new person, GoDaddy is going to be a great option. If you don't think you're going to need support, if you're a little bit more of a technical person, you can go with like HostGator or Namecheap. HostGator support is actually horrible. I use HostGator for my own hosting, and their support is terrible. And being a technical person, I've actually been on support with people and had to tell them that they were wrong about what they were telling me because I knew better than them because I'm trained as well. So I definitely wouldn't recommend something like HostGator or Namecheap if you're new to to this business, if you're new to websites, if you're not a technical person. If you are not a technical person, GoDaddy is going to be a good option for you. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to assume that you are using GoDaddy. So what you'll do then is you'll go to GoDaddy.com and you'll just type in the domain name that you want, the domain name that you desire. And then most likely, your first time you put it in there, it's going to come back that the domain name has been in use. Domain names are like real estate. Whoever owns them, owns them and controls them. So a lot of people out there just buy domain names without any, desire of ever putting a website in. They buy a domain name with the hope of selling it later. I mean, it cost them like $12 to buy it. So they'll buy, 5,000, 10,000 domain names. And they'll hope that they'll sell some of them later and make a profit off of the sales, because when they sell them later, they're going to sell them for, $1,000 instead of, the $12 that they paid. So you're going to have to type around a lot. You're going to have to play around with different, wording and different word options until you finally get a domain name that is available and that you could purchase. Now, there's going to be a couple of options as well. Like, do you want a .net? Do you want a .us? Do you want a .com? You're going to find that the .coms are the hardest ones to get a domain name for. But I do suggest that you try to go with a .com if you can, because .coms are just the most easily recognizable. I mean, just think about it. When you think of a website, what do you think of? You think of a .com. I mean, in fact, we actually call websites .com sometimes. So if you can get your domain name .com, definitely go for that. If you can't, you could go at a .us, .net, or .guru, or any of the other options, but they should be secondary options. When you finally get the domain name that you want, you see that it's available, the next step, of course, is going to be to buy it. And generally speaking, you're going to be asked if you want to buy hosting as well. And usually if you buy hosting, you're going to get a discount for buying the two of them together. So I'm going to say, since you need it right away, go ahead and buy the hosting as well, get it all set up, and we can go into installing WordPress, which is where we will pick up in the next video.